Good evening, everyone. My name is Bridget Anderson, and I am a co-chair of the Chicago Booth Black Alumni Association. I would like to take a moment to thank you for giving us some of your time today and to provide a little bit of context around tonight's discussion. CBAA is an organization with the core mission of promoting professional development, social networks, and civic engagement opportunities for Black alumni. We do this through robust programming nationally. For the last several years, we've held a brunch during Reconnect Weekend, a time in which many alumni return to Chicago to connect with old friends, professors, and classmates. Due to COVID-19, we had to postpone these plans. However, as coronavirus and economic turmoil amplified during those initial weeks of lockdown, we noticed an outsized impact on the Black population. Some of us have been through recessions before, but never a pandemic. The panelists and moderator presenting this evening were assembled in that context. Yet, we recognize the spate of incidences around racial and social injustice adds an additional dimension that we cannot ignore. I'd like you to remember tonight is the beginning of a series of conversations that we will have. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce to you our moderator, Eric Lewis from the class of 2007. Eric is the owner of a digital marketing agency in Houston that focuses on search engine optimization and digital advertising to help companies find clients online. Eric is also the host of The Weekly Option, a podcast recorded each week about options trading that started in 2018. Eric has a background in the energy business, mostly trading petroleum products and renewable fuels. He also is the president of the Houston Alumni Club for Chicago Booth. Thank you. With that, I'll take it over to Eric. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction, Bridget. And let me first start off by thanking each of the panelists that are going to be speaking tonight. We appreciate the questions you've sent in, and definitely we look forward to having you guys on some of our upcoming events in the future that Bridget hinted to. So I'll start off by introducing our panelists. We'll start off with Reverend Dr. Valerie Tony Parker, class of 1992. She is a bivocational leader, having built a successful career as a human resources executive in CPG, manufacturing, and distribution industries, where her work has been focused on labor negotiations, human resources strategy, organizational development, and change management. She's currently the Chief People Officer for the Greater Chicago Food Depository. Reverend Parker is also an ordained minister. Her work through the Consciousness Bar, her social justice platform, focuses on prophetic preaching about and engaging young adults in matters of social justice while deepening their understanding of their African diasporic heritage. She earned her BA from Johns Hopkins University and Doctor of Ministry from McCormick Theological Seminary. She is also a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Dr. Parker, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Jennifer Polk, class of 2008. Jennifer is a research vice president and chief of research at Gartner Incorporated, a research and advisory firm. Ms. Polk is part of a team of research analysts focused on helping CMO and marketing leaders understand and apply digital marketing to engage customers, evangelize their brands, grow and transform their business. Ms. Polk's research areas include digital commerce, multi-channel marketing, and personalization. Prior to joining Gartner, Mrs. Polk led client service and managed a team at a full-service digital agency, at Edelman Digital, where she helped companies develop and implement a variety of digital marketing strategies, techniques, and campaigns. She worked across industries, focusing on integration of digital and traditional marketing for maximum effectiveness. Previously, she held positions in social marketing, brand management, and relationship marketing in retail and financial services companies like Sears Holding Companies and JP Morgan Chase. Ms. Polk has spent 16 years helping companies achieve their business goals. She holds an MBA in strategic management from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. She also has earned a BS in finance from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. Please help us welcome Ms. Polk on the call tonight. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Eric.
All right. And finally, last but not least, we have Peter Washington, class of 2009. He serves currently as the Director of Portfolio Management at CapX Partners, a direct lending organization based in Chicago. In his capacity, Peter's focus is on identifying and managing risk within CapX portfolio of loans and leases to private equity-owned businesses. Peter began his career at CapX Partners in 2009 during the Great Recession as an intern and was able to parlay the opportunity into a full-time position by 2010. Peter is a 2009 graduate of the Chicago Booth School of Business with concentrations in accounting, finance, and entrepreneurship. Everyone, please help us welcome Peter Washington to the call.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. All right, so we'll dive into the discussion. Our first question, of course, because one of the obviously overarching themes right now is the economy and the fact that there's been a downturn. So our first question tonight is for each of the panelists, where were you in your career the year of your relevant downturn? And if possible, I'd like to have each of you comment. So we'll start off with Dr. Parker.
Yes, thank you. I think for me, there were two relevant downturns in the early 90s. There was the downturn where I was a student at Booth. And as I graduated looking for opportunities, there were very limited opportunities. I managed to get a consulting opportunity with Navistar, which is something that one must think about when they're thinking about how they navigate this economy and opportunities. In the downturn of 2008, I was unemployed for quite a while. And it had a deepening effect on me and how I thought about employment and how it informed how I helped others think about employment through downturns.
Excellent. How about you, Jennifer Polk?
That's a great question. I was actually graduating from Booth. I was in my last semester or trimester or at Booth, and I was due to graduate in June. I was not a part of OCR on campus recruiting, so my options in terms of navigating the recruiting landscape as a soon-to-be new MBA felt limited. It felt hard, difficult to identify opportunities. I knew that I didn't want to stay where I was. I was at JP Morgan at the time. I knew that I wanted to move on from there, not because it wasn't a great company, but because I'd earned an MBA in strategic management and I wanted to go in a different direction. And so I was fortunate to find something, but to the point Valerie made, it absolutely changes how you think about your options, how you think about, you might have been focused in a very specific place. I really want to do this for this type of company in this location. Maybe you're not open to relocation, or you're not open to changing industries, or you're not open to, looking a little bit more broadly at how you get that experience, perhaps in different ways. And I think the downturn of 2008, I saw forced me to open my eyes and be open to some different kinds of opportunities in companies and industries that I hadn't really considered.
Excellent, excellent. Peter, how about you? Where were you in your career during the year of your relevant downturn?
All right, so I'll recognize two periods because I had the distinct pleasure of graduating in 2002 out of undergrad from Florida A&M University, and also graduating from Chicago Booth in 2009. So in a lot of ways, I had very similar experiences where, one, I was recruiting during the depths of a recession, and coming out and essentially graduating and trying to find a job during the early stages of recovery. And I would say that those two experiences, they were challenging. One, because I was recruiting into finance as well. And there were just tremendous shocks that were happening throughout the finance industry, which made it a tremendous challenge. But I would say that the two experiences were very different for me individually. I can remember in 2001, I literally flying to New York City on September 27th, 2001. You can imagine that's 2 weeks after 9/11. And it was an eerie feeling in the city of New York. I remember sitting down and everyone's trying to have a fresh face while you're interviewing and trying to prove you're the best person for the job, you can add value. And the people on the other side, I mean, they're reeling because one, they've lost colleagues or they lost counterparties on the street. And two, they were trying to recruit to bolster their bench for future layoffs that would happen. And I fast forward to 2008, recruiting for internships and then recruiting for full-time in the fall of 2008. Once again, spending time in New York. I can literally remember traveling to New York to do some follow-up interviews in the fall of 2008. I don't recall the exact day, but I was literally in Midtown when Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. Many of my classmates who had taken internships at Lehman Brothers, at Merrill Lynch, which at the time were the two of the largest recruiters for investment banking at the time at Booth, they came home without full-time offers, and there was a lot of uncertainty. So, it was definitely, the finance industry was reeling, and I would just say, in most crises, you do your best by trying to stay as calm and as logical as possible, and focusing on kind of what is your heart wants you to do, where do you believe you can add the most value, and trying to cancel out all the noise that's happening around.
Excellent. Yeah, it's funny, in a career, it seems like people end up with various challenges, and the decision to pivot and what that looks like is really is so individual. Everyone approaches it differently. Everyone handles it differently. A couple of you mentioned outright the fact that you had to pivot, but I'd actually like to go a little deeper in that. I'm going to start off again with Valerie Parker. If you would, can you tell us how you would you make the decision to pivot, and is that something that you've had to consider personally in your career? And then we'll go across the panel as well.
I think thank you for the question. I think coming out of Booth, at the time, there was the opportunity to focus on labor economics and a discipline that was not finance, that was not marketing. And so there was actually, it was actually a lot more challenging, because the opportunities that came on campus and the opportunities that existed, we had those of the 3 or 4 of us who focused in that area had to really work hard to identify what those opportunities were. So when I think about having to pivot, I'm always thinking about that from the context of the HR discipline, because it's vast. So when you start in one segment, so you might start in training and development, or you might start in labor relations, but you might find yourself in organizations that either eliminate certain roles or eliminate certain functions. And so here you are working for an organization where your role has been eliminated, but you may be offered an opportunity to stay, but it may be in a different area of your discipline. Having done that enough, I began to think about what I call parallel pathing, and using the bivocational forethought to really kind of prepare myself. So I wanted to always make sure I had several opportunities. So in my bivocational world, the ability to pivot and see that there is another path that I can have in terms of a career that can still use that Booth experience has benefited me now, because now in a world where we're needing kind of some direction around matters of justice, matters of public policy, matters of care and counseling, and other kinds of opportunities for organization to look at their culture differently, I find that I'm in a unique place to be able to kind of take those two disciplines and intertwine them. So this pivoting is constant. It is a constant examining of the work that you're in. As Jennifer said, the industry you're in, the state that you're in, the organization you're in. Do I stay in private sector? Is there an opportunity in nonprofit? I think sometimes those opportunities are overlooked, and the skill set that we bring is much needed. So I think you must stay in a constant state of preparedness to be ready to pivot. I find when I work with people, they are on the back end of it. They're on their heels, waiting for a termination or waiting for an organization to close their doors, and then they want to pivot. Well, you haven't done the development, you haven't done the networking, you haven't prepared yourself. So for me, over those 20 some odd years, almost 30 years, I don't even know how long it's been, that's kind of how I've approached it, to make sure I have different vocations, and to make sure I'm staying current in both vocations and being aware of where there may be a downturn so that I can easily pivot and shift.
Thank you so much for that answer. Sorry for the delay. So Jennifer, when we were all speaking, you you shared a little bit of your story with regards to how you even approach opportunities. And I'm kind of pairing this in with this pivoting question, because sometimes people think that a pivot is simply about getting a job, or simply about getting a, changing careers. But when you start to consider family and all of the additional of who you are and what matters to you, can you walk us through how that has kind of guided you or affected your decisions in the pivot?
Absolutely. I wish I could say I thought this way in 2008. I didn't. This is something I've come to over the years since then. Although, if I had, I probably would have struggled even more with kind of finding that post-MBA position. I do think sometimes we have to make some sacrifices, and we have to accept at times what's available to us. And then once you get your foot in the door, once you get there, you sort of start to carve out your identity, what you want your career path to be, and what are the things that matter to you. What I learned, especially during my time at Sears and at Edelman, and even since joining Gardner, I've kind of developed a list of sort of what's important to me. And it turns out it's not company, it's not industry, it's actually not title, it's not even salary. Like, listen, I need to pay my bills. I need to pay back my student loans. I need to send my own children to college one day without student loans. I have some things I need to achieve financially, so I'm not out here working for free. However, what you learn is with salary comes expectations, and sometimes those are going to be expectations you're not going to want to have to meet every day. In terms of things like travel, the need to sacrifice time with the people that you love and care about, work that fulfills you and that you find valuable and impactful. So the list that I came up with is like, listen, I need to enjoy what I'm doing, right? I've had jobs that paid me very well and gave me a great title, and yet I did not find the work fulfilling. I didn't feel like it made a difference in what the company was trying to achieve or the impact I wanted to make in the organization. And so I decided that, number one on the list is I've got to enjoy what I'm doing. I need to enjoy who I'm doing it with. We spend a lot of hours at work. And I think this is an especially important point in the current climate, working with people who we feel value us. Ideally, that starts at the CEO, and it filters all the way down to our direct manager and our colleagues. Sometimes that's not the case at every level in an organization, in every part of an organization. But for the people that I interact with on a day-to-day basis, I needed to enjoy those working relationships. We don't have to be friends, but there has to be mutual respect. I have to feel like I'm learning from them, even if I don't always agree with them. So that was important. What am I doing? Who am I doing it with? I needed to continue to be learning. I think that's important, to a point Valerie made earlier, not just thinking about the pivot once you're on your heels, but already thinking about what you want to be doing next, whether it's in the same organization, in a different organization, or just being open to opportunities. Are you learning things that not only help you deliver value to the company and its customers today, but that set you up for success in whatever you choose to do next? And then lastly, does it fit with my life and not the other way around, right? Am I going to have to make some sacrifices that down the road I'm going to regret, missing out on time with the people that I care about, which, you know, we all have those moments where you have to grind it out and you have to make sacrifices. But if that becomes the common and sustained state of things, where you're constantly sacrificing and you're constantly missing out on the other things that make you who you are, whether it's a significant other, your children, your organizations, the causes that you care about, if you can't find a way to blend those into your life and make yourself into the well-rounded individual that brought you to this position, that probably makes you great at what it is that you do, then ask yourself how long you want to make that sacrifice. So those kind of became the 4 things that were important to me. Again, this wasn't true in 2008. In 2008, I wanted to find a job that would get me into the field that I thought that I wanted to go into, coming out with an MBA and a concentration in strategic management that would pay me enough to pay off what I had spent on this MBA, and that would make me feel like I had, you know, arrived, right? It's just along the way, in the aftermath, you look at some of the decisions that you made, some of the sacrifices that you made along the way, and you find out over time, you know what, that wasn't worth it. You know what, that title increase or that bump in pay wasn't worth it because I spent a year or 2 not really loving what I was doing, or I had to work with some people who really didn't respect me, or I wasn't really learning what I needed to be learning to get to that next level in my career, or gosh, I missed a lot of bedtime stories.
That is all valuable wisdom. It's funny how you get beyond that point of seeking simply money and title, and the rest of life comes into focus. So, Peter, you shared some of the pivot that you had to make, or even the choices you had to make when you were in New York and you're in Chicago now. So I'm actually going to lead off with you on our next question, which really is going to be about, because this isn't just an economically challenging, but add on to that, the start of that economic challenge was COVID-19. So can you give us an idea how your life has been affected professionally or personally from COVID-19, and how you and your family are managing through this period?
Right. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. So I did the math. I think we are I'm personally in week 13 of shelter in place, right? And I can tell you, I can't believe how many changes there have been, both in my work life, my family life, and I would just call it just community. So I think about a few things. One, in my corporate life, which is an important part of my life, we have a more reliance on technology more than ever. I can't say that I didn't see this coming, but in 13 weeks, it has been accelerated. I think the reliance on technology and the need for technology. I can't overemphasize how much technology is important for us to stay connected and to be able to be productive while working remotely. 2, corporate culture. And again, I come back to this theme of acceleration. These 13 weeks have just, I would say, kind of pushed us. And when I say us, I mean, I'm really thinking about this global economy. I think it's pushed this global economy forward about 5 years, right? No less than 5 years in 13 weeks. So when I think about corporate culture, I think about there's this trend to work remotely, and there's this trend like one day bosses will be okay with working remotely, and and personally in my own organization, we've seen leadership really, flex out of necessity, and then also just real time see the benefit of it. And I think working remote is here to stay. And more engagement as well in the corporate space. So I would say twice a week we get together, and I work in a small team. My team and my organization in Chicago is small. It's 13 of us, so we know each other pretty well. but twice a week we get together at 3 o'clock to do a check-in. There's some business that's discussed. We also leave time for personal. And I can say that, over the last 13 weeks, so that's, call it 26 meetings we've had, I've really gotten to know my colleagues a lot better, which is unintended benefit, a tremendous benefit. I think moving on to family, I think in a similar manner, it's just made for a deeper connection and deeper relationships. Yeah, I do have, it's kind of like the blessing and the curse, because you kind of live and work in the same place. There's 5 of us here. I have a wife and 3 children, 7, 4, and 1. That's the blessing, but also the challenge is you're trying to homeschool 3 children and manage your career. It can be challenging, but I thank God that so many colleagues and so many clients give us grace on that front. But it's deeper. I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my family every day. I have a 1-year-old child, and I actually had the chance to see him walk, right? And he's making he's talking. These are things that I would get a text message about with my 2 older children. So that's been a tremendous blessing there. But also with community. And I'll talk about COVID and with my church life. I'm a member of a church, and it's a pretty large church, and it's a cross section of Black Chicago, and we've had a number of members of my church be affected by COVID. They had caught COVID and were suffering through COVID. And there were a number of members that have passed, right? They succumbed to COVID. So it's a real thing. It's not a myth. It's not something that is intangible. It's very tangible to me. So I see this as really it's had a confluence of effects here in my life.
All right, thank you so much for hitting on each of those, both the professional and the personal. Being able to see your son, to be home, to see your child take first steps is unreal. What a blessing there. But you also touched on the church community, and that the church community has largely, I know it's arguable, but from my view, my perspective, it has largely sustained the Black community in this country over time. So it's perfect to have an ordained minister in our panel. Valerie, can you share a little bit more with us about, or really share how you have seen or been affected by the COVID-19 and how that has affected the communities that you're part of, as well as your professional career?
Yeah, thank you. I think I see it differently. I appreciate Peter's perspective on working from home. My children are grown and they're gone. So you'll all get to that place one day, but take your time. But I think where I see it is in the tensions around race relations and the tensions that are found in the disproportionate number of Black and brown people dying because of COVID-19. I see it in the stress of the church where our senior members are trying to stay connected, and it's also an additional burden because they are the ones who are more at risk, but they're also the ones who need just as much of that human touch that they can't have. I see where I know Peter talked about technology is here to stay, but I see churches suffering from a lack of technology and a challenge to meet the need of staying in touch with their congregation. And so we find different ways to commune. Some come out and volunteer. Some do Zoom, some do conference calls. But the importance there is the continued high touch. And keeping community. and pastoral care, not just for those who sit in the pews, but for those who are caregivers. I say that because as we think about what's going on relative to other things, race matters that are going on, when I hear culture shift, I see a time right now where people are beginning to become race unsilent. And so now the stress in the workplace of having to have a position on what's going on, not just with COVID, because, you know, we kind of talked about the disproportionate number of Blacks, and we can kind of say, oh, you know, it's a health problem, it's turned into an economic problem, but now that has morphed into, if I might say, the murder of George Floyd, now race is staring us in our face, and how do we navigate race in America when we talk about disproportionate deaths, disproportionate access to health care, disproportionate or unemployment that is disproportionately affecting Black and brown people. And now we're beginning, at least in our organization, to hit straight on racial equity and begin to have conversations around, especially what we do, getting food to the folks in the Cook County community, how COVID-19 and how the looting and the rioting as a form of protesting has damaged and closed businesses. Now, as businesses are starting to open, those same people who were going to go back to work now don't have a place to go back to work because it's been damaged. And so we are demanding that we have conversations around race and racial inequity. And at work, I hosted a Wellness Wednesday to talk specifically about Black trauma in America and give space for people to talk about their worries, their fears, their concerns, and really begin to cultivate and curate a conversation around healing. And so I don't think we can go, I agree with Peter in one regard that, you know, we're not going to be able to go back to, oh, you can't work from home, but I also say we can't go back. I'm going to find it difficult to believe that we can go back to who we were with the blinders on around race. Now, we'll have to find a way to navigate it. I know everybody can't go right in with guns blazing like I do. I recognize that. That's why you call me. I will help you. But I think it is important. Someone said it like this, and these were not my words, but it made me think that what we're going through with race in America is akin to what the Me Too movement went through. What did they mean by that? I believe they meant here is now the time that no one can run, no one can hide. And if there's ever a time for us to stand up and stake our claim in the need to have racial conversations around the economy, healthcare access, and other policies, it's now, where the light is not just on Chicago or Houston or LA or DC, but it is all around the world. My son lives in Germany, and they protested a couple Saturdays ago. He told me they showed up, I think Germany or Hamburg expected 500. They showed up with 15,000. So this conversation is not going away, and how we negotiate this as Black and brown people in our workplace is going to be important too. And I think because it goes to what Jennifer was saying about how do I find a place of comfort in a place where I got to spend a lot of time if they won't acknowledge that if they're race silent.
No, there is a lot there, very deep, and I love it. I've enjoyed getting to know the panelists through this. And, you know, when we were speaking, one of the things I like about Jennifer is she has some like old school mama raising techniques for her kids, like send the kids outside to play. There's a lot of Black people, a lot of people were raised, first off, but definitely Black. So Jennifer, I'm going to come over to you with two questions. How has your family navigated this whole COVID-19? And then I want you to also go ahead and transition into the discussion of I mean, we're everything's on the table tonight. We can talk about social justice. We can talk about being Black in corporate America, because I think those are all, I mean, you talk about just a trifecta or probably even more. When you look at virus, you look at economic concern, and then you add on the social politics of the day, the social injustice and what's happening. So we'll go ahead and start with you and let you kind of guide us on through, and then I'll come back to Peter and Valerie from there.
Gladly. You know, my sister and I were talking yesterday, and we talked about how it's rarely in life, I think, that you get a chance to literally feel God moving. And I think that for people of faith, this is that time, because there is no other reason why all of these events are culminating together. You can't explain it any other way, at least in my opinion. In terms of how we're navigating, you know, we have a really diverse household. So I've worked from home for 7 years. So working from home isn't new. I'm blessed in that regard to be able to do that. Now, what has changed is the other 4 people in my family are also here now. And it's different. You know, we've navigated it like most families, just being flexible, and finding out what works, often through trial and error, through talking to other professionals and other families and people that we know who are in similar situations. Everything from, I had a coworker who bought a bounce house, a small bounce house, to help keep their younger kids active. So we got a bounce house because, hey, now I'm running a summer camp, and I've got to try to figure out how to keep my kids active without being stuck in front of screens all day. So yeah, at a certain time of day, turn off the computer, turn off the video games, turn off the TV, go outside, get some fresh air, enjoy the 5 minutes of summer that we get in Chicago. And that's very much how I was raised. And if a bounce house helps you do it, bounce to your heart's content. Unfortunately, my husband and I can be here. We've navigated having a young adult. So we have a child that is not a child, but one of our children is college aged. So we've navigated having to bring her home from school and having her also e-learning at home, and still are navigating how we feel about the risks of COVID that are very different than how someone feels who is in college. You know, we're in different places in life. Our risk tolerance is different. How we see things is different. So we're trying to figure that out. You know, how do you experience life at 20 when not 40 or 50, but 20, when all of a sudden all the things that you would normally have done and the ways that you would normally have experienced life and experienced the people that you care about aren't as accessible anymore? And how do we as parents leave room for that? And at the same time, keep our entire family safe. We don't have it all figured out. We are literally figuring it out day by day. And every time I think we've reached like a new plateau in terms of the new normal, a new kind of curveball comes at us. So in a couple of weeks, my husband will go back into an office. And we're navigating that. What does that look like? How do you remain safe? What happens when you come home? How do we keep everybody else here safe? How do I manage the household during the day with the kids here and me still working full time? How do we do this? And, you know, all I can say is I'm not someone who likes change. And yet this is a season where I am being stretched and learning to like change and learning to deal with change and embrace change. And that's probably a good thing. And then Peter, you reminded me that I'll look back on this time when my kids are up and gone and grown, and I'll probably look back on it fondly. It's hard. It's hard. Having kids at home right now is hard, especially if you're working. And yet I'm learning my kids in new ways. I'm spending time with them that I would normally not have had. And these are times that you won't get back. And so you have to also find room in that for gratefulness and for gratitude. And so thank you, Peter, for reminding me of that. Pivoting to, you know, what was your other question? Remind me, Eric, I'm sorry.
Yep, it really is about, you know, being Black in corporate America, handling the social, everything that's happening with race,
Yep, I remember now.
inequitable. I mean, I can give you all the words. So.
Oh yeah, that's also really hard. You know, every day invokes, every day this week, just this week, has invoked fresh hurt and fresh pain. And it's coming as our colleagues and neighbors and friends who are not people of color are awakening to a glimpse, just a glimpse into an experience that we've lived with. And what I'm finding is the uncovering of fresh hurts and fresh pain is coming from people being willing to have those uncomfortable conversations, which is good. Unfortunately, what comes with it is our responsibility as people of color in corporate America to be a part of those conversations, to help educate, to literally bare our souls, to pick at wounds that had scabbed over, that we had chosen to bury, hurts and pains that we had tried very hard, worked very hard at putting behind us and setting aside so that we could show up every day. And now when we show up, people are asking us to share those things that are very personal and very private in the name of helping them understand, in the name of helping them be more sensitive. And it's hard. It's hard to bare your soul every day and also live with the realization that the news cycle could change. And tomorrow, white America might not care anymore after you bared your soul. And so you have to also come at it as a believer, with hope and with faith that through conversations and compassion and a willingness to learn about one another's struggles and a willingness to listen and a willingness to change and being a participant in those uncomfortable conversations, because they're just as uncomfortable for us as they are for people who are not of color. But the willingness on both parts to participate in this moment in an effort to drive to a better society, a better community, a better company, a better world for all of us and for future generations. It's necessary, it's hard, it's exhausting every single day. If I thought it was exhausting to show up and ignore microaggressions and racism, man, nobody told me it was also exhausting to show up and deal with them. But I'm grateful for the opportunity. And one of the things, and we might have talked about this yesterday, or I may have talked about it in a different conversation, is, because Valerie brought it up, I'm going to say, as a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, many of my sorors are out there on the front lines, as are hers. And my husband, who's a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, we both are compelled by civic responsibility to take social action, and yet there's still a pandemic. And with small children, we can't be out there in that way. We choose not to be. I'm sure there are people making other choices, and that's great. But our choice has been to continue to shelter in place. And I've personally felt like I'm missing my spot on the front line. I'm missing the chance to be a part of this moment and to be a catalyst for that change. And then as I sat through these conversations at work, we've been having a lot of real talks at work, giving people a forum to talk about the pain and to share, both people of color and to share with non-people of color, so that we create awareness and we create this safe space. And being a part of those has been both a blessing and a burden. It's amazing to be a part of, and I'm grateful that our company is creating the platform for that. It also leaves me wounded and hurt and near tears to share my stories and to hear the stories of others. And yet I had a moment yesterday where I realized, if you can't march, you can share. If you can't hold a sign and not put yourself at personal risk or your family at personal risk, that's just right now not acceptable, you can write a letter, you can sign a petition, you can start a dialogue, you can be willing to be vulnerable, you can hold somebody accountable, you can share critical feedback. So right now, I think it's on everyone of all races to figure out, how do you personally lead in this moment from right where you are? And if you can do more, if you can get on the plane and go march with Reverend Al in August, do that, please. That would be great. I probably can't. So I'll keep speaking and sharing and signing petitions.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think I was nodding so much that my head, I'm sure I look like Max Hedren. I guess that's a throwback right there. I just named my age right there to throw that out. But, just to follow with that same sort of direction, Peter, as a Black man in corporate America, how do you lead in this period, both at home and in your office? What do you feel like is your role, even with friends? Like, just if you could just walk us through how you're approaching this.
Right. No, I try to lead with honesty and authenticity, and it's I think that's an easy concept to say, harder to carry out, but I would say I'm thankful for a family that that strengthens me, and also for colleagues that embrace me. But I can compare. We're talking about kind of pre-COVID and post-COVID. We can talk about kind of pre-unrest, post-unrest, or during unrest. And I would say the culture, the corporate culture that I experienced for the past 18 years is literally to compartmentalize race, right? Compartmentalize that. And I do think it made it a place where you can come to work, you can kind of talk about everything but race. I would say it worked about 85% of the time. And depending on kind of who you're working with, who your colleagues are, and how they show up. I mean, sometimes that can you can have conflicts, but for the most part, I think it was a pretty safe place where you just don't talk about it. It's like the third rail. But there, I can think about periods where there was the rumblings of unrest and hurt that I was watching and experiencing, and it wasn't really discussed, right? So I think about 2014 in Ferguson, and I think about Trayvon Martin in Florida. These things weren't really they weren't discussed, right? Fast forward to 2020, and you had 2 weeks ago, definitely this was a once in a 50-year, once in a generation kind of social movement. And we had our Monday morning meeting. We always have our staff meeting on Monday mornings, and this is the one day I'm just dreading going to work, because it's just the environment was just too heavy. It was just too heavy. And we started our meeting, and I was so heartened because two of the leaders in my organization just opened up by saying, I want to start off today like it's any other day, but it's not. And there's a lot that's happening. And I will say that I think through COVID and growing more intimate with my team, right, we opened up and everybody had a chance to talk about these things. And that whole idea of compartmentalization was thrown out the door, right? And to be authentic, I had to tell my truth. So we talked, I talked about my experiences in racial profiling, and the fact that between the age of 16 and 18, I was stopped by the cops no less than 10 times. And I didn't even know that cops searching your car was illegal, but I experienced that. And people wanted to know, and I shared that with them. But also, I am hopeful because there's some observations that I do have, and we're dealing with multiple generations, and I think that for the older generations, this is I think a moment of awakening, and I think really being aware of injustice, right, and inequities, and people are leaning in. I really do believe everything that I've seen, I've experienced has been authentic. But I look at the kids, right? I look at the 20-year-olds. I look at the coalition that they're building. I look at how diverse they are, how disgusted people are with what is happening. And I'm very hopeful, because the 20-year-olds are literally going to be the ones who set the agenda for my children who are 7, 4, and 1. That makes me very hopeful. Now, it's my job to figure out what I'm going to do. Yes, I've had a lot of conversations. I continue to have conversations. I haven't quite figured out how it's going to manifest itself into kind of my personal agenda, but it will get done. It will get done. But that's my experience with I think the kind of the confluence of emotions that's been going through my world for the past 3 weeks.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you sharing that you were searched and stopped by the police so much is a reminder to me of what Jennifer was saying, and that all of our stories are so personal. And I ended up, before I share, I wanted to take a moment and remind people that we do have a Q&A session coming up in about 5 to 10 minutes. So we've received a few questions, but if you would send in questions and we'll do our best to address them. But from a personal standpoint, I grew up in a scenario where I was raised in Plano, which is a northern suburb of Dallas, predominantly white. And my father was also a minister on the like a weekend. He was one of the associate ministers. So I'm a PK. I wasn't one of the bad ones though. but my weekends were spent in South Dallas. So on Monday through Friday, the us and them was, sometimes race. On the weekends, the us and them became a social scenario, right? And there always seems to be that us and them, but when it comes to sharing that personal story, I mean, so much has happened in the last few weeks, and I've gotten text from classmates of mine from Booth who I love. I mean, great people who opened up their hearts. And it's hard because I don't always want to share the pains. I've told people in the past that oftentimes when I have to acknowledge race, I now have had to acknowledge something that I can't change, right? I can't wake up tomorrow morning and I can't out-earn my race. I can't out-educate my race. And I've seen so many other friends of mine share their stories over the years, like you, even a friend who was not recently, but like in the last 2 to 3 years. This is a guy who's worked for JP Morgan. He's been a consultant at some of the largest consulting companies. And he was detained walking out of Walmart where he had paid for goods and had a receipt in his pocket. And the security guard, followed by officer, did not want to look at his receipt because they were certain that he had stolen something. So there are really hurtful and really painful situations, and you just can't fight everything. I think sometimes knowing when to fight and how to fight makes it that much harder. So to swing back to Valerie, because Peter, Jennifer, and I all graduated kind of around the same period, but I would be remiss if I didn't say, Valerie, having graduated in '92, you have seen changes over time, and I would assume you've seen changes over time. So can you talk about your experience as a Black woman in corporate America in the '90s and how that's different today? I'm hopeful that it's better today, but I'm sure there are going to be some other areas that are equally painful today.
I'd like to say there were tremendous changes. What I saw in the 90s, at least in my discipline, was Black people were placed in roles that were not strategic, not necessarily strategic. I was a labor professional, so I negotiated labor contracts with steelworkers and UAW and some of the larger white male-dominated unions, and it's tremendously difficult. I was, disrespected. I had one business agent sit in a meeting, turned his back on me, and read a newspaper as I was trying to present the proposal. And so then the question becomes, how will you respond? Because you're not the white guy that they're used to patting on the back. So I gathered up the team and I said, when you're ready, you treat me with the same respect that you treat the white guy, then call me. I'll be upstairs. And it's hard to do that, but if I didn't, I wouldn't make way for other people who look like me, because especially in labor, you don't find a lot of people who look like us. And so over time, what I found and what I'm excited about is seeing more Black and brown people in consulting, seeing more Black and brown people in the financial industry, in all industries. I'm also more excited, just as excited, if not more, to see them starting their own businesses, really good, treading down the path of entrepreneurship. I think that was what was different. When I went to Booth, which was then called the GSB in the 90s, everybody was racing after this American dream, this elusive American dream, only to find they were disappointed because I think they didn't do some of the things that Jennifer said, but that was a point in time. I think now they've evolved to say, I can do social enterprise, I can do nonprofit, I can start my own, I can do, I don't have to live in another country to accomplish what I want to accomplish. So I think that they are thinking more broadly and deeply about the work that they do and where they find themselves doing the work. I think that's what was different. Because when we came in, everybody was like, oh, I want to go here, here, here. It was like 5 places everybody wanted to go. And it was rare that we got the opportunity.
This is a question I'm going to ask the entire panel, and then we'll start to move towards the Q&A session. But I'd love for each of you to share advice that you might offer mid-career professionals right now, newly minted MBAs, and you can address it to the at-large community or specifically the Black and Hispanic community and any other minorities.
I would say a couple things. Don't neglect the struggle. And by that, I mean, reach back and talk to whether they're alum or whether they're Black and brown people who have pressed their way to get where you're going. And don't wait until you can't find a job. Too often we start networking when we need a job. And let's face it, we know why you're calling me, right? I know why you're calling me, and I'm less interested to help you because you didn't use me as a resource early on. And that's a lot of times how people think. So I'd say don't neglect the struggle, don't neglect the learnings. And I think Jennifer talked a little bit about this. Don't neglect the part-time opportunity, the gig opportunity, the consulting opportunity, especially now, and even volunteering. We have volunteers come through our doors and we see them so often that we even ask the question, what do they do? Why are they here? What's their profession? And then we have a conversation with them and we realize, oh, they are X. Oh, we need X. So that volunteering also puts you in space and time with other people. And then I would probably say, be gracious to yourself. We are so hard on ourselves trying to find that. I get it. I'm ashamed to say I'm probably still paying on student loans, but be gracious to yourself in finding that job and find what you want to find. Not what someone told you needed to do. And if that takes a long time, do it, because where you do not want to be is in an organization where it's not a good fit. I've been on that side of the table where I've had to look at people and say, this is not a good fit. So I would say don't neglect the struggle, consider other forms of entering into the workplace, and do not begin networking when you need a job. We can see right through that.
And Jennifer, if you would, what advice would you give to a newly minted MBA or a mid-career professional in this period?
I'm going to pass on advice that people have given to me in some cases. A gentleman told me this who was a consultant, a former McKinsey consultant. He said, and someone had told him, live so that, and he used some words I'm not going to use, live so that you have independence. And what he meant by that is manage your resources, manage your money, manage your budget, manage what you spend your money on, so that you have choice. I know individuals who have done that and who have had the choice to walk away from a job that no longer served them, even when it meant taking a hiatus in a period of not working. And I realize that's a hard pill to swallow if you have student loan debt, if you're coming out of an MBA program, if you're mid-career and you probably have a mortgage, you may have a family, you may have some obligations. So that may not be a choice that you have, but as much as you can, pay down your debt, pay down what you owe to give yourself that freedom. And really nowadays, that freedom could mean life or death. If you work for a company that's asking you to make choices, to travel, to go back into an office, to go back into a situation that doesn't feel safe, and it is happening, having the financial freedom and the flexibility to say, you know, I'm going to sit out this next month or two. I'm going to take that FMLA. I'm going to take that unpaid leave. I'm going to have a seat because I care about my safety and my health and my well-being and my family. That means something. It could literally mean life or death. Having the freedom and the flexibility to take a position that maybe doesn't pay what you wanted it to pay, or to pick up and move for your dream job. Even when companies perhaps aren't able to offer the common relocation packages, that means something. So live in such a way, manage your resources in such a way that you have some freedom and some flexibility, not to have to take whatever somebody is willing to give you. Don't be afraid to barter, to take consulting. I laughed because I joked with the panel a few years ago before my current position. I parted ways with a company, and in between positions, and I had a few months in between positions, I wanted to stay in my field. I wanted to stay active. That's another thing. Be a student of your craft. Be visible. Social media gives us an ability to be visible and in ways that we couldn't in 2008, 2009, 2007, certainly 1992. You couldn't be visible as easily as you can be now. It doesn't mean that you have to have your own consulting firm or that you need to set up a website, but simply reading and consuming what is out there and being a part of the conversation of the industry that you're in, whatever that industry is, can increase your relevance so that when someone, a recruiter or a headhunter, is looking for people who are operating in a particular space, that you show up on their radar. But what happened during that period of time in between positions, I wanted to stay relevant and I wanted to stay active, and I didn't want to pay my gym membership. So I went to a small family-owned gym at the time, and I saw a lot of things that they could be doing differently from a marketing perspective. And so we struck up a bartering agreement. For 3 months, I didn't pay for my gym membership, and they got about an hour a week out of me of some consulting and things that I thought that they could be doing differently that I think and I hope benefited them. And I got some great experience of getting out of the sort of ivory tower of corporate America and working with a small business. It was a really different experience because you have to think differently. What can practically be done when the staff is 2 people who are also the owners? And so it was actually a very, very fruitful experience that I still draw from. So be willing to take on those things that are different, that are unusual, that are not necessarily fitting the mold of what you thought that you wanted. Ask challenging and tough questions of the people that are interviewing you. Interview them as much as they're interviewing you. I can think about companies that I thought that I wanted to work for at one point, and when actually given the opportunity to interview with them, learned some really interesting things about how they treated their employees, learned some really interesting things about their expectations. And I learned enough to know that the job that I thought that I wanted, that I didn't get, that I now was interviewing for again, I actually didn't want. And so interview them as much as they're interviewing you. I realize there is an immense amount of pressure to get a job, to talk about, where you're going with your new MBA, or to feel like you're making progress as opposed to standing still in your career if you're mid-career. But don't let that lead you down a path that you're going to regret later on. And if you're mid-career, look within your own company. Start looking within your company. And it might not be a change in role, a change in function, a change in business unit, a change in title or salary. Look for opportunities to gain experience, if nothing else. And it could mean be the hand raiser. Be the person in the room who says, I'll take that on. Be the person in the room who says, I can lead that. Be the person in the room who offers, how can I help you? How can I support you in this? Not in a way that is self-serving, but definitely make sure that along the way you learn some things. And it might not mean a promotion right away. It might not mean, again, the title change or the salary increase, but it could absolutely mean you're learning things so that you're not feeling stuck in a mid-career rut. You're continuing to learn, and those skills will make you marketable for whatever is next.
That's fantastic advice. I've found even in the entrepreneurial space, the more I learn, truly, the more I earn. I've had to learn a couple of new skills, and next thing you know, you have a new offer to offer to your clients. But So Peter, I'm going to do two things with you because we have about roughly 9 minutes left, about 8 minutes left. So any advice that you'd like to share, feel free to. And I also have the first audience question. I'm just going to give them individually to you guys. So if you could just take a couple minutes in your response, and I think we can get to all of them. So Peter, feel free to offer advice to newly minted MBAs and mid-career professionals. And on top of that, I'd love for you to give us an idea of what keeps you focused and motivated during these challenging times.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I think my advice to newly minted MBAs is very much the same to a mid-career professional, but I'll put it in the context of this economic environment that we're in. And I do see that it's going to be important that you kind of keep your shoes laced pretty tight, right? So I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of change that's going to happen. It's going to be a tremendous amount of shakeout in this market, in this post-COVID environment. And I think everybody should just be very aware, right? So I'll break it down to three things. So one is bet on yourself. So to the young person who's going into the second year of B school or coming out of school, know why you came to school. There was an experience that you wanted. At its core, there's a certain function that you want to that you want to pursue, right? You want to do an analytics, or you want to do sales and business development. Stick to your guns and bet on yourself. You need to have that self-confidence more than ever in this environment, because there are going to be so many things that are going to tell you no. There are going to be people, there's organizations, there's environments that are going to tell you no, it can't be done, it shouldn't be done. But my advice to you is stick to your guns, bet on yourself. Two, which is related, I would offer you to identify and invest in long-term trends, right? So it means a lot of things to a lot of people. I mean, it can be career-wise, it could be also literally investment-wise. But let's think about how this economy is changing. I think they said 250,000 retail stores are shutting down. You have e-commerce is probably operating at probably the projections of 2025, 2027 in basically June of 2020. There's going to be continued shakeout. I would tell you that think about skating to where the puck is in any industry that you're in, right? So do that. And if you have some extra dollars, maybe you want to invest in some of these trends as well, right? Whether it's stock or private investments, whatever it may be. I wish somebody would have told me in 09 or 08 and 09, like, yeah, if you have some extra bucks, there's this company called Apple. You should probably kind of double, triple down. But do it. And then three, build and spend equity. So I think you can do that in any organization. But what I mean by that is use your voice. And I think culture, I can only speak for me, but in corporate America, right, in a lot of ways, just happy to be there. You don't want to rock the boat too much. But if you're there, if you've been at any organization longer than 2 years, you have equity. And there will be times where you need to spend that equity to make statements, to kind of have a position. I encourage you to do it. Spend it. And perhaps you can convert that into more capital as well. But those are my three comments. But as far as kind of what keeps me focused, what keeps me focused, I think it's really, it all comes down to family. That's really was the center of my life. It's my wife and my children. I have a vision for, I think, providing a life and resources for my children. This whole there's a concept of generational wealth. I think my parents did a great job in giving me, I think, a lot of cultural wealth, and a lot of love. But it's my job to give my children the leg up that they deserve. So that's really what keeps me going.
That's fantastic. And I just want to point out for those of you on the call, thank you so much for being on listening with us today. And we are going to run over because we have a couple of more questions from the audience that I think are definitely worth bringing to the panel. But if you do need to drop off, we understand. So Valerie, for our next question, someone in the audience asked, should alumni advocate, what type of changes, if any, should alumni advocate for in terms of resources for current students and alums to address racial justice or better support of people of color?
I think one of the first resources is the financial support of programming. I forget I know I work with Jessica Jagger. She was Pounds when I knew her. And working with her office, I think where there is financial support, there is commitment. So I think that you need to advocate that whatever initiatives or programs you have be funded. But having said that, though, you need to make sure that whatever you're presenting can be embedded within the culture of Booth, that it can be sustained, and it can also perhaps impact the community, because there's an opportunity there to engage the community as well that I know some students have talked about. So I would say make sure whatever idea you have around racial justice, whether it's ensuring that racial equity is taught as a part of the LEAD program or the onboarding program, or whether there's another opportunity for engaging in social justice activities through some of the student groups, it needs to be funded. I've heard this time and time again, even from the time where I was a student. Lovely idea, but if they're not going to put the dollars behind it, it's not likely going to happen. So I would say, if I leave you with one thing with this short time, advocate for the dollars, but make sure that you have a very detailed program or initiative that you can share that can be operationalized long-term and sustained.
I think that's fantastic. Here in Houston, I'm actually the local alumni president. And so when Jessica and Eddie and that team would come to town to speak to some of the applicants, some of the prospective, some of the MBA candidates, I guess they're just prospective at that point. I've gotten to rally the troops and get them at these dinners. I think it is important for us, the Black alumni and the Hispanic alumni, if we want to see the numbers increase, it's our own investment, because not everyone has had sort of the funnel, not everyone has had the training to not only get admitted to, but also compete at a school like Booth. And so that's another way to give back, is just in grooming the prospective students of color that want to come, and ensuring that there is a pipeline available for the school to choose from. Jennifer, for you, and I'm sorry, I'm addressing individuals, but if anyone has an additional comment, feel free to dive in. Jennifer, someone asked, how would you like non-Black, brown colleagues at work to show up and be an ally day to day?
Oh, that's an amazing question. I've been seeing commentary in LinkedIn and other places about allyship, right? Versus solidarity, right? It's sort of one thing to say, I hear you, and I stand in solidarity with you. And we're seeing everyone from corporate America to individuals to influencers to politicians take that stance. I think being a true ally, it lies in action. And so while I appreciate the well-meaning colleagues who've reached out and asked if I'm okay, or who've commented on something I've shared in a positive and empathetic and supportive way, I think that what I would look for, and I'm proud to say that I'm seeing this in my organization, is I would look for action. And it's hard, right? Because sometimes action happens in those small moments when you have an opportunity to say something that is insensitive or to stand by while someone else does, and you have to make a personal choice as a non-person of color and as a person of color to not just stand there, to call someone out on what they said appropriately, to not laugh at it. Look, if it's not funny, I'm not laughing, right? To not entertain the things that are said. So there's the small moments, and that's a personal choice that I probably won't ever see. I won't ever see it when you observe that a joke is made that's not funny, that's in poor taste, and instead of just sitting idly by, you call it out for what it is. Whether you do it publicly or whether you pull that person to the side. I may never see that, but that is allyship. But allyship also means that when you have a chance to make choices, to make decisions professionally, that you think about whether those decisions are being made equitably. So when you're hiring, or when you're staffing a project, or when you're putting somebody in a position of leadership or putting them in the limelight and you've got this roster of people to choose from, look across that roster. And if everybody on that roster looks like you, and nobody on that roster looks like anybody else, doesn't have to be me, could be somebody of Hispanic descent, it could be any sort of representation of diversity. But if you look across these sort of leadership opportunities, growth and development opportunities, opportunities for people to be in the limelight, to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized. If you look across that and you see a homogeneous group of individuals, whether by gender, by race, by ethnicity, you need to see what role you could have played in making a difference and what role you can play now in making a difference. And I'll say this specifically to the topic of race in America right now. Corporate America has broadened their definition of diversity, and it's given them the latitude to stop talking about Black people. Diversity now means global diversity, right? We don't have to have one more Black person on our leadership team or our board of directors, but if all of a sudden we have an office in India, we are diverse. No, you're not. In some respects you are, but racially you're still not. And so I think it's calling out those things and not allowing the past, right? Not allowing yourself to be okay by saying, that group of speakers is diverse. Look, there's women and LGBTQ, and not taking anything away from any other group. But if there's no racial diversity, then you are still lacking in diversity. So when you're in a position, you might not be the CEO, but if you run the project, you run the conference, you run the event, and you're in a position of making those decisions, you can be an ally by really challenging, hey, did we give opportunities everywhere we could? And recognizing that sometimes disparity comes in the form of, hey, we're not giving people this opportunity because we're looking at the top of the top, the cream of the crop, the best of the best. Okay, but you have to ask yourself, was the path to get there fairly and equitably available to all people? Otherwise, you're just perpetuating a problem. So it comes in action. That's the difference between solidarity and allyship. Allyship means being active in the decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis, in those moments that I'll probably never see, in your opportunity to put somebody in a position or not put them in a position, to promote them or not promote them, to highlight their capabilities, to give them that next chance, that next leg up, not in a way that they don't deserve, but truly looking at where can we create equity that has not historically existed and overcome the inequality that has existed.
You know, can I add to Jennifer? Jennifer's spot on, because when we talked about diversity and inclusion, there is that piece about equity that's missing, right? And Jennifer also talked about early on about Black and brown people having to educate our white allies or those in solidarity with us on our struggle. And that's not our job. But what I would like to offer to people who want a resource are two books that have been helpful in this conversation. And one, I don't know if you can see it. There it is. You know, it's called White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism by Robin DiAngelo. And the other one I don't have with me, but it's called How to Be an Anti-Racist. So it's not good enough to say I'm not racist, but we have to say I'm anti-racist. And that's by Ibram Kendi. And I think if you sit with those books and give yourself time and space to read them and contemplate on the content, I think you will be able to see yourself a little differently and then come back into the conversation with our Black and Brown brothers and sisters in a way that is not asking them to help you it's not asking us to help you be better about how you engage with us. I really appreciate Jennifer's comments.
Yes, I did too. I'm ready to go out and protest. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll behave. Thank you, Valerie, for those 2 books. Someone asked me recently for some book suggestions, and so I wrote both of those down. I'll be passing that along. And Jennifer, you reminded me just this week, just 2 days ago. So I use a co-working space here in Houston, and they shared an upcoming panel on investing in diverse communities, and it was 1 female and 4 white men. And it's not that I don't feel like they could do the topic any justice, but I told them the exact word you just said, and it's, you are perpetuating the problem. It'd be like having an all-male discussion, all-male panel discussing motherhood. Like, wrong topic, wrong people, right? So,
well, you know what's happening too is still tokenism, right? Is the other problem we get is by the time an organization wakes up and realizes that they're underrepresented racially or across gender lines in some of these conversations, they look around and they don't have anybody to choose from. They have one somebody that they have put in a position of leadership, and that becomes the token that represents the race, the gender, the sexual orientation, whatever this is. And it's a heavy burden to bear. It's still an underrepresentation of an entire group of people, and it comes from a place of not having enough diversity, period. So that you don't have choice, you don't have the ability to select, you don't already have those people in the room, in the conversation.
But Jennifer, I would add, it goes back to looking at our systems of inequity, right? So why don't we have that? What does that recruitment process look like that causes those inequities, so that, you know, are there requirements that you're asking for that you know that Black and Brown people may or may not have? So now your slate, you say, I can't find anybody, but of course you could. But the way you crafted your slate has excluded people by virtue of an inequitable process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is such a powerful. I'm sorry, Peter. I don't want to cut you off. Were you about to say something as well?
No, well, you know, it kind of speaks to something I was thinking about. One additional question is like, what do you want to see happen to corporate America? What do you want to see corporate America do? And I think, you know, Valerie and Jennifer hit it right on the head. You know, just re-engineer your recruitment process and your networking process to, authentically include people of color. And you just have to fish in different ponds. You have to have a different strategy to, I think, attract and retain. So I'm getting tongue twisted here, but right. You know, that's you have to rethink it, and you should do this with the council of an organization or a group or a committee who are diverse.
Excellent. Well, and I mean, what a perfect note to end on, especially seeing the college pendants behind you is a reminder that there is no shortage of well-educated and prepared professional Black people in this country to choose from for corporate boards, for corporate positions, and to just support. But with that being said, we have gone well over, and I know we could probably talk for another 2 hours, but I'm gonna go ahead and bring in Bridget Anderson. Thank you to each of our panelists. You guys are amazing. Thank you, Bridget, for lining this up, all the work that you do with CBAA and your team in putting this together. And I turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Eric. And thank you to Valerie, Peter, and Jennifer as well. This has been a phenomenal panel. So I have a couple of quick sort of housekeeping things I'd like to quickly run through. I'm going to share my screen. I promise it won't take more than sort of 2 or 3 minutes for those of you that are still on the call. All right, I'm going to quickly walk you guys through CBAA and show you where we are. Technology. All right, well, we'll just kind of hang out on this slide here. So what we're trying to do over the next couple of months is sort of have an ongoing dialogue around this topic and many others. As we said before, you know, the initial framing of this talk was around Black Booth alumni sharing their perspectives around various economic downturns. Obviously, we talked about so much more sort of above and beyond that. And what we're looking for now at CBAA is to get a little bit more feedback from you, the audience, around some of the discussions and conversations that you would love to see in the future. So I would highly encourage all of you to shoot us an email at blackboothalumni@gmail.com with your ideas and suggestions on speakers. I think getting some of this sort of crowdsourced feedback will help us figure out the cadence for how often we can have these conversations. Is it something we should be thinking about weekly, monthly, etc.? But I think until we can all sort of physically be together again, whether it's through a brunch or a dinner or some other kind of event, this is the way that we want to kind of continue the dialogue and engagement. So I thank you very much for participating this evening, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Good night.